The first truth must be spoken plainly. Though it violates every catechism drilled into my marrow, we saw a man flayed alive, his body carved to the bone, his heart lifted in bloodied hands, and before the litany of ending was complete, he was whole again. He opened his eyes, gasped once, and begged for death. Then the cycle began anew. That is where my record must begin. Though my quill trembles even as I etch these words. This is no sanctioned miracle. This is not the Emperor's light. This is an aberration, a heresy parading itself as liturgy. I am interrogator, Kestal Varun, Ordo Sepulturum, attached to Inquisitor Helbrecht's retinue. My commission was clear: investigate anomalous regenerative phenomena on penal world Gathalamor. Secundus, Hive Bastion Thet, reports described condemned men harvested for flesh and bone, yet repeatedly restored to full integrity. It was catalogued as potential bioheresy, possibly Tyrannid spore, possibly dark mechanicus interference. I expected the reek of Xenos, or the oily fingerprints of the heretic. Instead, what awaited us was worse. A market clothed in hymns, priests with butcher's knives, and sanctioned seals burned into walls with the Aquila itself. It is my duty to give account, however impure. May the Emperor judge me for speaking truth. We made planetfall during the 36th hour of the ash storm. Gathalamor Secundus never sees the sun. Sky and ground alike are one choking gray. Hive Bastion Theta, 9 rose from the haze like a tombstone, its walls blackened by centuries of soot. The vox crackled endlessly with static, though beneath the distortion, I thought I heard chanting. I attributed it to stress. The others did not remark on it. Perhaps they could not hear. Our escort comprised a file of penal guard, their faces scarred, each bearing the sigil of expiration already branded across the cheek. They did not complain. They did not speak. Their eyes were hollow, like men already executed. The first breach of natural law came swiftly. At the outer gates, we were halted by an ecclesiarch, clad in butcher's whites. He carried no censer, no book of litanies, only a cleaver slick with blood. He asked our clearance, examined the rosette, and without hesitation struck his own arm from the shoulder. The stump spurted once, then knitted. Bone, sinew, flesh reformed in a span of heartbeats. He lifted the new arm, steaming in the chill, and said with ceremonial calm, "The flesh is tithed, the flesh is returned. This is the Emperor's abundance." My hand went to my sidearm, but the penal guard remained impassive, as though this were common sight. Only our psyker, Lirai, shuddered and muttered a half-heard prayer. I marked it in my log as impossibility number 1. We were escorted inward. The hive was not as others I had known. The corridors smelt not of rust and oil, but of iron, fresh, metallic, copper sweet. Fluorescent strips flickered above, their light dim as though choked by haze. Every few meters we passed shrines made not of stone or steel, but carved from petrified bone. I touched one, and felt warmth as if blood still pulsed within. The ecclesiarch led us deeper, to a place called the First Circle. The name was not explained. It did not need to be. The air grew hotter, thicker, wet with humidity like the breath of a slaughterhouse. The First Circle was a hall of stone altars. On each lay a condemned man, chains piercing his limbs, mouths gagged with iron. Ranks of priests worked with saw and scalpel, slicing muscle, severing organs, draining blood into gilded reliquaries. They worked calmly, reverently, murmuring canticles, as if conducting a high mass. When one body was spent, shriveled and hollowed, the priests stepped back and began their prayers. I counted the words, for rhythm has always steadied me. 9 verses, each repeated thrice. At the final word, the impossible occurred. The husk trembled, swelled, and filled. Blood re-entered veins, muscle reformed, eyes opened. The man gasped alive, shivering. He was whole, though moments ago he had been butchered, and then the knives resumed their work. We stood in silence. Even Helbrecht, who has seen plague worlds and demon incursions, said nothing. The penal guard did not move. Only Larai wept softly, repeating, "It sings. It sings in the marrow." I recorded her words. They trouble me still. As we advanced, I forced myself to adopt the tone of a report, clinical and exact. The priests numbered at least 50. The condemned at least 200. Each altar was inscribed with glyphs in repetition. 9 concentric circles surrounding a crude aquila. Every regrowth took precisely 9 litanies. I checked my chronometer thrice. The measure was consistent. The number pressed into my mind. 9, 9, 9. I remind myself, the sacred number of the enemy. Yet the sigils bore the double-headed eagle, either blasphemy in disguise or sanction from above. Both options are unthinkable. We approached one altar more closely. The condemned man was conscious throughout his mutilation. His eyes followed the knife, but he did not scream. The gag ensured silence, yet his expression was one of resignation, not terror. I leaned close, against my better judgment, and saw fake scars along his chest, dozens of old wounds healed and reopened. He had been through this cycle uncounted times. As the saw opened his ribs, I swear I heard him whisper past the gag, though no sound should have emerged. His lips formed words unmistakable. "Help me." The flesh knitted again before my eyes. That was when the ecclesiarch turned, regarding us not as witnesses but as guests. He spoke. "The market opens at sundown. You will attend. You will see what abundance means." His voice was calm, certain. The penal guard nodded, as though this were expected. Only we outsiders balked. Hilbrecht muttered that we would observe only under sanction. The priest merely smiled, as though he had heard the same protest 1,000 times. "All who enter the circles must observe," he said. Then he placed the cleaver across his own throat, opened it, and stood as blood fountain. His corpse collapsed, and within 9 heartbeats he stood whole again, blade gleaming as if never used. We were shown chambers for rest. Though none of us could rest, I transcribed all I had seen. But even as I write, I sense distortion in my record. The words repeat. The rhythm forms its own litany. I find myself whispering phrases I did not mean to write. Perhaps fatigue, perhaps warp taint, yet my hand cannot stop. I write what I hear. Ninefold, ninefold. The song beneath the flesh. It will not cease. I pray this report finds judgment before corruption finds me. I end this entry with one truth undeniable. Flesh obeys no longer the laws of nature here. It obeys liturgy. It obeys something beneath. If this is sanctioned, the Imperium itself bleeds. If not, then we have stepped into hell. And sundown approaches. The hall of altars faded behind us, but the sound of saws lingered like echoes in the skull. We were led through iron doors into another descent. Stone steps, slick with condensation. The air thickened. I tasted salt and copper with each breath. Lanterns flickered dimly, yet the walls themselves glowed faintly, as though veins of faint crimson pulsed within the stone. I wondered if it was trick of light, but Lirai shook her head and whispered, "Living rock." Her pupils were blown wide. I dared not ask what she truly saw. The ecclesiarch butchers guided us without hesitation, their cleavers tucked at their sides as if ceremonial swords. At the base of the stair we entered what they named the communion hall. The first circle had been a slaughterhouse. This was a cathedral. Columns of flayed bone rose to a vaulted ceiling, where chains dangled, each bearing charms of dried flesh, knuckle bones, scalps, incense, burned in censers. Yet its smoke smelled not of sanctified oils, but of roasting fat. Candles guttered, their wax mixed with tallow that dripped scarlet instead of white. Every detail confirmed it. This was worship through butchery. At the center lay the circle of butchers, 9 priests in perfect alignment, each intoning fragments of Ben-Herrick litany interwoven with High Gothic. Their words formed patterns that set my teeth on edge. Ratio 9, return 9, consume 9, renew 9. The chant was cyclical, as if endlessly feeding itself. I recorded as much as my cogitator slayed aloud, though part of me feared transcribing heresy was itself a crime. Still, I serve the Ordo Sepultorum. Suppression of plague demands record. Duty steals the hand. Fear corrodes the soul. On the surrounding platforms lay the condemned, not inert, but kneeling upright in chains. They swayed with the chant, heads bowed, awaiting knives. Their flesh bore countless scars, each one layered atop the other. When a priest approached, a prisoner bared his chest willingly. The knife opened him sternum to belly. The organs were removed and laid reverently upon golden platters. The choir of butchers sang louder. Then, as before, the impossible happened. Within 9 verses, the man was whole. Once more, scar tissue, sealing in neat lines, breath steady. He opened his eyes and bowed, as if grateful. Gratitude for mutilation, gratitude for theft. I clenched my fists to steady myself. The nobles began to arrive. They did not enter through the gate we had used, but through private doors above the choir stalls. Cloaked in sable, bearing masks of beaten gold, they took their seats as spectators. I recognized insignia half hidden beneath their robes. Rogue trader dynasties, ecclesiarchal suborders, and at least one sigil of the Navis Nobilite. Their presence chilled me more than the knives. This was no hidden cult. This was patronage by sanctioned bloodline. Lerai gripped my sleeve hard enough to draw blood and whispered, "Do you not hear them beneath? They chant with the priests, but not in the same tongue." I asked what she meant, but she only stared at the floor, trembling. The ritual advanced to demonstration. A condemned guardsman was stripped and laid upon the altar. His chest bore the regimental brand of 21st Valen Dragoons, a line known for its loyalty. The priest carved free the man's heart, lifted it high for nobles to see, then placed it upon a bronze scale. The organ pulsed still, pumping blood onto the floor. 9 breaths later, the guardsman sat up whole, chest unscarred, eyes blank. He saluted the nobles with emotion drilled by years of service. They applauded with slow, deliberate claps, not with glee but reverence. Flesh was not product here, it was liturgy. I forced myself to analyze. Regenerative phenomena can be warp-derived, yes, but always unstable, decaying within cycles. What we observed was stable, repeatable, precise, not tyrannid, whose chitinous growths lack uniformity, not Janader craft, for the Mechanicus has no doctrine for instant renewal without vat or machine. This was something older, something ritual-bound. My notes trembled under my quill. Repeat cycle confirmed. Regrowth exact. Number 9 constant. During the rites I observed repetition. In architecture, the floor tiles were arranged in concentric rings of 9. The candles burned in clusters of 9. Even the butcher's steps echoed in a cadence, divisible by 9. Whether design or delusion, I could not deny the pattern. My mind began anticipating the number before it appeared. As though compelled, I caught myself mouthing the rhythm beneath my breath. I silenced it quickly, praying no one had noticed. The nobles began their part. One approached the central dais. He wore a mask, wrought into the face of a saint, but his voice was young, imperious. He bit upon the flesh of a prisoner, not coin, but promise. 9 convoys of grain tithed from Valen, he declared. The priest nodded, carved free the prisoner's left arm, and delivered it upon a silver platter. The noble accepted it with both hands, as though it were a relic. The arm twitched, Fingers spasming, he raised it to his lips and pressed a kiss upon the palm. At once, the prisoner's stump regrew, skin sealing, bones sprouting anew. He bowed in thanks. The noble carried the severed arm away like sacred treasure. I felt bile rise in my throat. Trade in living flesh, sanctioned by ritual, not slavery, not butchery, but sacrament. Helbrecht's jaw clenched, yet he spoke no word. Perhaps even he feared to profane what too many nobles embraced. Only Lerai whispered again, "The song is growing louder." The demonstration ended with a final act. A prisoner was flayed entire, skin peeled from crown to sole, draped upon a frame of iron. The priest sang the ninefold litany, and before my eyes, the man stood clothed again, in perfect flesh, the flayed skin still hanging on the frame beside him. Both twitched, both blinked. Two bodies, one soul? I cannot be sure, but the nobles cheered. They called it the abundance doubled. I wrote, replication confirmed, violation beyond comprehension. At the close of ritual, the head priest approached us directly. His face was lined, his eyes calm as marble. He inclined his head to Helbrecht and said, "The auction begins at sundown. Seats are reserved. You will see what the Emperor provides." His voice was not threat, not request, but certainty. He walked away before we could answer. As I sealed this record, a prisoner chained nearest to me lifted his head. His lips moved, but no sound emerged. Still I understood his words as though whispered in my ear. Not Gothic, not Ben Herrick, but something far older. He said, "You are late. The auction begins at sundown." Then his jaw unhinged and snapped back, and his body hung limp again. I do not know if I imagined it, yet the words will not leave my skull. The ash outside dims. Time slips. Sundown approaches. I am afraid we will not leave the communion hall unmarked. The amphitheater was carved not from stone, but from marrow. I swear it. As we were led down the tiered galleries, my boots struck steps too smooth, too curved, too organic to be quarried rock. They shone faintly under torchlight, as though polished from within. The air here was damp and metallic, the smell of blood infused with incense. Hundreds of seats rose around the pit below, already filling with nobles and masked dignitaries, their robes rustling like funeral shrouds. At the center stood a dais of blackened steel, where the first auctioneer waited, clad not in robes of office, but in a butcher's apron that gleamed wet with old gore. We were placed close to the dais, seats of honor, though we had not asked for them. Helbrecht bristled but said nothing. His hand tightened on the pommel of his blade. Leray kept her head low, whispering without pause. I heard fragments. They chant behind the air. They chant beneath the eyes. The penal guard sat without reaction, their posture rigid, their faces utterly blank. I realized then that they were not here to protect us. They were here to ensure we remained. The auction began with the striking of a bell. Its tone was wrong, discordant, echoing deeper than the chamber, reverberating inside the bones. The auctioneer raised his cleaver as gavel. From the shadows, the first lot was brought forward, a slab of living muscle, quivering, still bleeding. It was placed upon a silver tray and lifted high. The nobles began their bids, not in coin, not in thrones, but in offerings of tithe and loyalty. 9 pilgrim ships, called one. 9 shrines restored, cried another. The butcher nodded at each offer. The slab went to the highest, a matron draped in crimson veils. She lifted it reverently and pressed it to her chest. It adhered, melting against her like wax upon stone. She shuddered in ecstasy as her wrinkles smoothed. Her form rejuvenated before all eyes. Murmurs of awe rippled through the chamber. Lot followed lot, a heart still beating, a lung inflating with each prayer, an eye that blinked and wept though unattached to any face. Each was received with devotion, each transaction sealed by litany. The buyers were not gluttons, but supplicants. They treated the flesh as relic, not commodity, and always, the condemned regenerated, ready for the next cycle. I noted in my slate, the market functions endlessly, no resource depletion, supply without limit. I almost wrote abundance, but I stopped my hand. That word felt like heresy now. The chanting never ceased. The number 9 repeated, woven into every bid, every hymn. 9 verses before flesh regrew. 9 bells between auctions. 9 nobles stood in the first row, their masks forming a circle of watchers. Even the flicker of torches seemed to pulse in ninefold rhythm. My mind anticipated each pattern, my lips shaping words unbidden. I bit my tongue until it bled just to remind myself of silence. Midway through, a figure emerged that silenced the chamber. A noble cloaked in sable raised his hand and demanded the next lot unseen. The priests obeyed. They dragged forward a body, bound in chains, covered in shrouds. With ceremonial flourish they tore the coverings away. What stood revealed defied sense. A guardsman's body, muscled and whole, but headless. The neck ended in smooth scar tissue, not severed wound but healed stump. Yet the body breathed. The chest rose and fell. The arms flexed. The hands twitched as though seeking weapons. The nobles gasped with reverence. The auctioneer declared, a complete soldier of abundance, offered in totality. The nobles raised their bids higher, promises of fleets, of shrines, of entire manufacturums tithe. The sable noble outbid all with a simple phrase, 9 worlds sworn. The chamber fell silent. The offer was accepted. The headless guardsman was chained and delivered to him. I felt my stomach twist as the thing moved with will, though no eyes guided it. As it was led past me, I saw the fingers of its right hand drum upon its thigh. Not random, but patterned. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. I recognized the cadence at once. Valen Dragoon, march rhythm. It was a soldier still, even without head, even without command. The realization froze my marrow. I whispered it aloud, and Lurai gripped my arm. It dreams, she hissed. It speaks through dream. Do not listen when it comes. The auction continued, with fever. The crowd swelled with fervor, their chants blending with the priests, until the amphitheater pulsed like a single organism. More flesh was sold, more organs raised. The condemned never diminished, every cut healed, every body renewed. Time lost meaning. I checked my chronometer and found hours had passed, though it felt like minutes. The air thickened, damp with sweat and blood vapor. My throat burned. My ears rang with overlapping chants. Then the bell struck again. The final lot was announced. From the depths of the pit, priests hauled forth something concealed beneath black cloth. The crowd hushed. Every breath held. The cloth fell away. It was another soldier, but this one intact, save for his head. The head sat separate, cradled in a silver bowl, eyes closed. The body knelt upright, breathing. As the priest intoned the litany, the head's eyes opened. They rolled back, then fixed upon the crowd. The lips parted and spoke, though no breath carried the words. The market is never empty. The market is within you. The amphitheater erupted with chants, nobles weeping, priests raising knives in ecstasy. The body lifted its hands in salute, while the head continued speaking, its gaze sweeping across the audience. I felt the eyes meet mine. The voice spoke again. Interrogator Varun, you are late. Sundown is done. The auction has begun. I cannot explain how it knew my name. None here should know me, yet the words pierced me like a blade. Hulbrecht reached for his weapon, but his hand froze midway. Liray screamed and fell convulsing. The penal guard sat still, unmoving, as if carved from stone. The nobles chanted louder, drowning everything. My quill skittered across slate, recording words not my own. I write them now, though I do not understand them. Ratio 9. Flesh unending, price unending, market unending. The bell struck once more. The sound shattered thought. When my vision cleared, the amphitheater was silent again. The head's eyes were closed. The body slumped lifeless. The nobles began filing away in silence. Satisfied, fulfilled, the priests dragged the corpse back into shadow. Only the sable noble lingered, the headless guardsman chained at his side. As he passed, the soldier's fingers drummed again. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. I could not look away. Larai whispered faintly. It has begun beneath. Then she collapsed into silence. My quill records, though my hand does not move. The bell still rings in my ears. The amphitheater emptied slowly, but the memory of its chants clung to the air like a stench. We were not dismissed. We were herded, pressed through iron gates, into a chamber smaller, more intimate. Torches burned low, casting walls in greasy shadow. The nobles did not follow. Only the sable figure remained, his chained prize shuffling behind him. The headless guardsman's steps were deliberate, each one echoing with strange rhythm, as though matching a heartbeat beneath the stone. I noted the cadence, unwillingly. My lips almost moved with it. The chamber smelled of rust and salt, though no sea lay within 100 leagues. The auctioneer's cleaver still glistened wet. He placed it upon an altar beside a book of flayed skin. Symbols sprawled across its pages. Not Gothic, not Benheric, but script that shifted as I looked at it. My eyes slid from line to line, unable to fix upon any word. Luray hissed like a cornered beast. She covered her ears, though no sound issued. It is screaming, she muttered. Every letter screams. Halbrecht barked at her to silence, but his own voice faltered. The sable noble lowered his hood. His face was smooth, too smooth, like porcelain. Not a wrinkle, not a blemish, not a pore. His eyes were pale as milk, yet they saw with clarity. This is what you came for, he said, voice calm as a confessional. Proof of abundance, proof of eternity, proof the Emperor provides through flesh, unending. His tone was sermon, not boast. Each syllable struck like ritual. I wanted to argue, to demand how this could be sanctioned, but my throat closed. The headless guardsman stepped forward instead, and though no mouth moved, the air filled with words. They dream me. They trade me. I endure. The voice was flat, without timbre, echoing from stone, from air, from within my skull. The body's hands flexed, drumming upon its thigh the march of the dragoons. My mind filled the absence of the head with memory of comrades lost. I saw faces of soldiers dead at Valen, their bodies shattered in trenches. Was this one of them, reclaimed, reforged, remade into sacrament? The thought hollowed me. The noble stroked the body's shoulder with reverence. This one speaks, not to ears, but to the dreaming soul. He was the first to endure complete severance, yet remain whole. His value exceeds any tithe. He turned to us, his pale eyes fixing upon mine. And now he will guide you, for the coordinates are locked within. At that moment, Luray convulsed violently, back arching, eyes rolling white. Her mouth opened wide, voice replaced by Benheric pulses, static bursts, rhythmic, mechanical. My slate activated, unbidden, recording strings of numbers that aligned themselves into a grid. I recognized the form. Coordinates, layered thrice, triangulated deep below the hive. Locations unmarked on any map. The words spilled from her mouth until her jaw cracked, blood foaming, then silence. She collapsed limp, breathing shallow. The noble nodded. satisfied. "The womb calls," he said. He gestured toward the guardsman, who turned with mechanical precision, pointing one finger downward. The cadence of his tapping shifted. 9 beats, pause, 9 beats again. My chest tightened, even Helbrecht paled. He spat a curse, but made no move to draw steel. Perhaps even he knew the air was too thick with wrongness. I forced my voice steady. "What lies below?" My words shook, yet I asked. The noble smiled, his porcelain face unchanging. "What always lies below? The foundation, the root, the market's first stall. You will see. You must, for none may record without witnessing." He turned away, as though our consent mattered nothing. We were escorted again, through another gate, down another flight of stairs. This descent was colder. Moisture slicked the walls, dripping steadily, pooling at our feet. The air smelled of mold, yet beneath it the copper tang of blood remained. The torches dimmed the further we went, until only the pale glow of phosphor glyphs lit our path. They pulsed faintly in rhythm, as if the walls themselves had heartbeat. I wrote it mechanically, though each letter burned to carve. The stairs ended in a hall of cells. Within each, prisoners writhed. Their chains were bolted, not to stone, but to what looked like cartilage, pale and ribbed. The prisoners bled freely, yet each wound closed before the blood had dried. I saw one man's throat slit by his own teeth, gnashing in frenzy. Within moments it sealed, leaving pink scar tissue. He screamed and tore at his flesh again, over and over. The cycle repeated endlessly, a loop of mutilation and renewal. His eyes met mine, filled with pleading despair. I turned away. Another prisoner tore free his own arm and hurled it against the bars. By the time it struck, another had grown in its place. The severed limb twitched on the floor, crawling like vermin, until a priest scooped it up and placed it in a reliquary. The prisoner bowed, lips moving in silent prayer of thanks. I nearly vomited. Helbrecht muttered, "This is no market. This is a forge." His words rang truer than I wished. Lirai groaned faintly, consciousness returning. She whispered, "They are not prisoners. They are seeds." Her eyes rolled back again. At the hall's end was a single larger cell. The body within pulsed and shuddered, skin bubbling as though something inside pressed outward. As we approached, it convulsed and burst apart, flesh spraying across the bars. For a moment it seemed annihilated, but then the gore upon the floor slithered together, forming a glyph in perfect symmetry, 9-pointed, curved, like an eye. The blood pooled, shivered, and collapsed again into a quivering lump of meat that slowly reformed into the man who had burst. He gasped alive once more, his lips moving in rhythm. Could not hear the words, but the noble beside us whispered them with delight. I felt the chamber tilt. My chronometer ticked irregularly. Seconds stretched, snapped, stretched again. My vision blurred, colors bleeding into one another. I pressed my hand to the wall for balance and felt warmth. The stone throbbed beneath my palm. Not stone, muscle, vein, hive walls alive. The headless guardsman raised both hands, palms outward, fingers drumming their rhythm. In the silence that followed, I heard his voice again, not aloud, but deep inside. "Below lies the first stall. Below lies the bargain. Below lies the womb." The noble turned, gesturing toward another stairwell, descending further. He said simply, "It waits." I forced myself to log final notes. Coordinates mapped. Regeneration continuous. Flesh responds to pattern. Glyph forms unbidden. Hive not stone. Hive alive. My hand shook so violently my writing fractured into scratches. I fear even to look upon the slate again. As we were ushered toward the stair, a prisoner nearest the bars reached out, his fingers brushing my sleeve. His mouth opened. A voice, my own voice, issued forth. Kestil, Varun, you will not return. I tore free, stumbling. Helbrecht dragged me upright. Lirai whimpered prayers. The noble only smiled as though satisfied. The guardsman drummed his ninefold march, leading us downward. The descent has begun. The stair twisted ever downward. A spiral carved, not by hand, but by something that had burrowed, leaving striations like ribs along the curve. Each step stuck beneath my boots, tacky with unseen residue. The further we descended, the more sound dulled. As though air itself thickened, my ears popped with pressure, and I realized we had gone deeper than any sanctioned strata of the hive. My chronometer flickered, its digits looping the same second thrice before stuttering forward. Helbrecht muttered catechisms under his breath, each syllable harsh, meant to cut through the stifling silence. His voice faltered when the walls shivered with answering rhythm. Lirai stumbled, hands clutching her skull, whispering that the stair was singing. I heard nothing, yet the cadence of my pulse matched the curve of the descent. I feared to test whether it was mine or the hive's. At the base, the stair opened into a cavern, vast and lightless. Only phosphor nodes, embedded in the walls, provided illumination, each flickering in irregular sequence. They were not electrical. They pulsed like organs, each glow a faint bioluminescence. The noble raised his hand, and the headless guardsman halted. For a breath all was still, then the cavern itself exhaled, a rush of damp air warm against our skin. The ground beneath us shifted, as though flexing. We walked forward upon tissue that yielded, not stone, but something softer, fibrous. My boots sank slightly with each step. A trail of ossified growths formed crude pillars, their surfaces etched with the same mutable script I had glimpsed upon the flayed book. I tried not to look, but peripheral vision betrayed me. The glyphs warped, resolved into faces, then into voids where faces should be. My stomach twisted. Ahead, an altar stood upon a mound of bone. Upon it lay a mass of relics, helmets of guardsmen, shattered loss rifles, ecclesiarchal icons fused with veins. Each object pulsed faintly as though alive. The noble approached reverently, placing his porcelain hand upon a tarnished aquila that writhed under his touch. Here, he intoned, the market was birthed. Here, bargains were struck with the marrow of saints and sinners alike. And still it grows. Lirai whimpered, her voice cracked. This is no forge. This is gestation. She reached toward one of the relics, fingers trembling. Helbrecht yanked her back, snarling. Touch nothing, yet her eyes glazed as if she had not heard. I forced myself to record. Altar composed of ossified remains, relics integrated with living tissue. Objects exhibit autonomous pulsing, possible warp resonance. My stylus shook with every word. The guardsman's body moved forward, hands drumming upon his chest. The cadence shifted. 9 pause, 3 pause, 9 again. The cavern responded, walls contracting, a deep groan reverberating through marrow and stone. From the shadows emerged figures, shuffling hunched, not prisoners, not merchants. These were the husks of previous buyers, flesh sloughed, bones bent, yet they moved, each carrying fragments of themselves as though offering. One staggered close, his ribcage split open to reveal a shrine of candles burning within. He extended a hand of bone toward me, palm carved with script. I recoiled, bile rising. The noble spoke to them in that same calm voice. Witnesses return. The market remembers. The debt renews. They bowed, their bodies splitting further, offering more of themselves to the unseen presence in the cavern. Each fragment crawled toward the altar, fusing with the mound. I whispered a prayer, not to the Emperor, but to silence itself. My voice shook. This is not sanctioned. This cannot exist. Yet even as I said it, I knew the administratum would deny this record, erase it. The market thrived, not because it hid, but because it was allowed, because its product served. The ground beneath us convulsed suddenly, knocking us to our knees. From the altar rose a column of flesh, spiraling upward, forming not a statue but a doorway. Within its frame shimmered void, not black but red, the color of raw meat. It pulsed like a wound. The noble gestured toward it. Through lies the womb, through lies the bargain, through lies your proof. Helbrecht growled, his faith a shield. I will not walk into that. His hand reached for his blade. Before steel left sheath, the guardsman moved, headless body faster than any mortal. Its palm struck Helbrecht's chest with a hollow thud. He collapsed, gasping, armor dented inward as though struck by a ram. Blood spilled from his mouth. His eyes locked on mine. End this, he rapped. The noble's pale gaze fell upon me. There is no end, only renewal. The husks began to chant, voices overlapping in hideous harmony. The sound was not song, but grinding, like stone upon bone. The glyphs across the walls flared brighter, casting the cavern in crimson glow. Lirai screamed, clutching her slate. Numbers spilled across it, infinite, unending. Her voice joined the chant, unwillingly, each syllable tearing her throat raw. I crawled to Helbrecht, gripping his arm. He wheezed, eyes dimming, yet his hand forced mine upon the hilt of his blade. Take it, he coughed. Carry the proof, or burn with it. His last breath rattled. His eyes glassed over, staring unblinking into the ceiling that throbbed like flesh. I wanted to weep, but the chant pressed into me, vibrating my ribs. My own lips trembled, syllables forming before thought. I bit down, drawing blood to silence them. The noble's face was serene. He extended a porcelain hand toward the doorway. Enter, witness, and you will understand abundance. Refuse, and you will still enter, though less whole. The guardsman's body stood beside him, hands ceaseless in their rhythm. 9, 3, 9. The pattern etched itself into my bones. I could not unhear it. I recorded final notes with shaking hand. Subject Helbrecht. Deceased. Doorway manifested of flesh. Market chants resonance with glyphs. Coordinates it confirmed. My writing trailed, ink blotting as my hand spans. The husks drew closer, their bodies breaking apart willingly, their pieces slithering to the doorway. The portal pulsed brighter with each sacrifice. Lirai fell to her knees, eyes vacant, blood streaming from her ears. Her voice rose in chant, no longer human. I felt the pull. The doorway throbbed, a heartbeat not mine, but within me. The noble's words echoed without sound. Step through, or be stepped through. And then the guardsman turned toward me, faceless. Yet I knew he was staring, his hand extended, fingers curling as though beckoning. The chant grew unbearable. My body leaned forward without consent. I fought to anchor myself with Helbrecht's blade, its weight real, solid, holy. Yet even that steel trembled in my grip, as if eager to fall. The doorway opened wider. A scream rose from within, not of pain, but of birth. The doorway pulsed like an open artery, its walls slick with translucent film. The scream that issued from it had no mouth, yet it filled the cavern, every stone and bone vibrating with its pitch. I clutched Helbrecht's blade, its weight dragging my arm as though reluctant to strike. The noble waited, porcelain features patient, his hand outstretched in invitation. The headless guardsman's drumming grew louder, chest and thighs thudding in rhythm. each strike driving me forward like a lash. Lurai crawled toward the portal, her slate clutched to her breast. Blood seeped from her eyes, but she smiled faintly, whispering fragments of Binheric code that bled into numbers. It calls, coordinates, alignment. Her voice dissolved into static. The husks circled her, pieces of their ruined bodies sloughing into the doorway, fueling its expansion. The scream shifted into something almost liturgical. 9 notes, 3 silences, 9 again. I pressed my back to the bone pillars, trying to anchor myself, but they throbbed against me, warm as living flesh. The glyphs upon them warped, twisting into my own name. Kestel, Virun. Letters carved themselves into ivory, wet with blood. My breath faltered. I closed my eyes, but the name echoed still, each syllable drawn in pulse and vibration. I opened them only when Luria's voice rose, sharp. She had half her body within the wound, her face radiant in its glow. "I see him," she cried. "The Emperor's hand." The rest of her words turned into a shriek, cut short. Her torso vanished into the portal. Her legs convulsed violently, then were dragged whole inside. The slate clattered to the floor, still alive with numbers. I seized it instinctively, but the device burned my skin. Glyphs crawling across the surface. They etched coordinates deeper and deeper, not in ink but in scars upon my palm. I dropped it, howling, and the noble's serene face tilted with amusement. "You cannot resist record," he said softly. "Even flesh remembers." The guardsman stepped forward, placing his palm upon the bone mound. The portal shuddered wider, tearing with wet sound. From within spilled tendrils of glistening muscle, grasping the air. They wrapped around relics on the altar, dragging them inside like offerings. Each object writhed with its own pulse before dissolving into the redness. I stumbled back, but the cavern pressed me forward. The ground beneath my boots swelled, pushing, forcing me closer. Hilbrecht's corpse shifted behind me, his dead eyes wide open, lips twitching with unnatural movement. "Witness," he mouthed, though no breath carried the word. His hand jerked upward, pointing toward the portal. My stomach lurched. He had been claimed too. I gripped his blade tighter, though my hands bled upon the hilt. "I will not go," I hissed. "I will not." Yet my body trembled, traitorous, knees bending as though to step. The noble's pale eyes pierced me, endless patience within them. "You already have," he murmured. The scream from the portal softened into heartbeat. It matched my own. No, my pulse shifted to match its cadence. My skin tingled, every vein alight. My breath quickened. I felt pulled inside out, my organs yearning toward that gaping wound. I tried to cut the feeling with Helbrecht's blade. I carved my forearm, the sting bright, blood flowing. But the wound closed before my eyes, sealing as though never made. Flesh denied my rebellion. Worse, the blood that spilled lingered upon the floor, then slithered forward to join the altar. My pain had only fed the market. Despair swallowed me. I whispered prayers, but each syllable emerged, distorted, echoing in tongues, not my own. The noble nodded approvingly, as if my blasphemy pleased him. The guardsman's drumming quickened, shaking dust from the ceiling, though the dust was not stone but flakes of scab. The husks began to move toward the doorway en masse, their bodies splitting further, torsos peeling open, limbs detaching, each piece crawling into the portal like vermin. Their chants blended into a single tone. I covered my ears, but the sound resonated within bone, bypassing flesh. Then the portal's surface rippled. Something pressed from within, vast and undefined, a silhouette without edges, shifting geometry that could not exist. My vision blurred, tears streaming unbidden. I felt smaller than dust before it, The noble whispered reverently. The womb stirs, the market births. I staggered backward, yet there was no escape. The cavern's walls pulsed inward, funneling me closer. Hilbrecht's corpse lurched upright, staggering toward the portal, blade missing, chest caved but still animate. His lips stretched into a grin, too wide, his face splitting along the seams of old scars. I recognized comrades in that grin, faces long dead. I nearly dropped the blade, but rage steadied me. I swung, striking his neck. The blade sank deep, but his body did not fall. Flesh knit around steel, trapping it. He seized my wrist, forcing my arm toward the portal. My own weapon turned against me. With last strength, I twisted, wrenching the blade free. The wound closed instantly, but the force hurled him forward into the wound. His body vanished, consumed. The portal flared brighter. It screamed triumphant. My ears bled. I collapsed, shaking. The noble loomed above me, expression unchanged. You carry proof now, he said. His porcelain fingers touched my temple lightly. Images exploded through my skull, worlds of meat, fleets of bone, entire systems consumed yet fertile, birthing more and more. The vision seared my brain. I smelled my own hair burning. When his hand withdrew, I lay gasping. My skin crawled as though worms moved beneath. I feared to look, lest I see them. The guardsman stood beside him, rhythm ceaseless. The noble spoke once more, final as a decree. You will enter, recorder. There is no report without witness. And then the portal itself bent toward me, sucking air, drawing me with irresistible force. My nails clawed at the ground, tearing strips of pulsing flesh that twitched in my hands. I screamed, but my voice broke into chant. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was the noble smile and the guardsman's endless drumming. The womb received me. There was no impact when I passed through, no transition from matter to matter, no sensation of threshold. One moment the cavern's heartbeat crushed my ribs. The next I was weightless, suspended in absence. My body hung without gravity, though I felt pressure upon every nerve as though submerged in liquid thicker than blood. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound emerged, only bubbles of light that drifted away and burst into silence. Shapes surrounded me, but they were not shapes as the eye knows them. Angles folded in on themselves, corners that bent in curves, edges that refused to end. Each shimmered wetly, colors I could not name. They breathed. The space itself inhaled and exhaled, every expansion dragging me closer to its center. My flesh stretched with it. I tried to move my arms, but they drifted too slowly, as if I were no longer pilot of my limbs. A voice bloomed within me, not from without. You are record, you are vessel, you are debt. It was the same toneless presence I had heard through the headless guardsman, but multiplied 1,000-fold. Harmonies, without number. My teeth rattled against one another with the resonance. I forced myself to think in order, to cling to discipline, drilled into me since youth. I am Kestel Verone, officer of the Administratum. I observe. I write. I endure. Repeating it anchored me. For a moment, the strange current slackened. I reached for Helbrecht's blade, still clutched in my hand. The weapon remained solid, its edge gleaming even in unreality. Perhaps the only thing here untouched. Around me, unfurled a corridor, though it was not built but grown. Walls of pale membrane arched high, veins glistening as rivers of light. The ground beneath my boots squelched with each hesitant step. I was walking within a living organism, one vast as worlds. The air or fluid stank of copper and ammonia. I gagged, yet the smell was inside me as much as around me. Ahead, a sound like chanting returned. I followed it, unwillingly, each note a tug upon my spine. The passage widened into a chamber of throats, hundreds, perhaps thousands, embedded into walls, ceiling, floor. They gaped and wailed in harmony, lips stretched, tongues shriveled. Their faces bore no eyes, just mouths, eternally screaming. The sound battered me from all sides. I dropped to my knees, pressing hands over ears. It did nothing. The cry came from marrow, not air. In the center of this chamber, the headless guardsman stood waiting. His chest still beat its drum, hands slapping a rhythm upon his breastplate. The throats matched his cadence, their shrieks aligning into pattern. 9. Pause. 3. 9. He turned toward me, though he had no eyes. My stomach lurched. My slate trembled at my hip, switching on by itself. Coordinates scrolled endlessly, layering symbols upon symbols, until the screen burned white. The guardsman extended a hand. From the wrist, jutted wires and veins braided together. They twitched like worms, yearning toward me. I stumbled back, but the chamber flexed inward, mouths closing behind me one by one, forcing me closer to him. My grip tightened upon the blade. If I struck, would it matter? Could anything die here? I whispered prayers, half remembered, half desperate. Each time I spoke the Emperor's name, the throat screamed louder, as if in mockery. My breath hitched. I lunged forward and swung. The blade sliced clean through his arm, severing it at the elbow. For a heartbeat, silence fell. The severed limb twitched, then sprouted fresh tendrils that coiled to the stump, fusing. The arm reformed whole before my eyes. The guardsman's body resumed its rhythm, as if nothing had happened. The throats echoed, louder than before, their screams reshaped into laughter. I tasted blood, realized I had bitten my own tongue nearly through. I staggered away, but the floor itself rose in ridges, propelling me toward the center. There the flesh parted, revealing a pit. From its depths surged a heat, so intense my skin blistered. Yet when I touched my arm, it was whole again. The wounds would not remain. Pain came, but never consequence. The voice filled me again. Debt must renew. Flesh must cycle. Witness must feed. The throats chanted in rhythm, wordless, endless. I gazed into the pit, its depths shimmering with wet light. Figures writhed below, hundreds of them, tangled, fused, their forms looped in impossible geometry, bodies twisted into arches, arms forming lattices of bone, faces stretched across surfaces wider than any head could bear. They moaned in perfect unison. Among them I saw Larai. Her body was split in thirds, each segment still alive, each head chanting different verses. She reached upward with hands that melted into others, fingers elongating like roots. Kestel, one of her mouths called, "Write us true, write us eternal." I nearly dropped the blade. My heart hammered. My notes would be my damnation, but if I ceased to record, would I even exist? Was that the bargain? To write was to remain. To deny was to dissolve. My slate hissed against my thigh, demanding touch. The guardsman stepped closer, gesturing toward the pit. His faceless head inclined. I knew what was asked. Step forward, join the lattice, become another mouth. I screamed and slashed blindly. My blade cut one of the embedded throats, splitting it wide. Black ichor sprayed across me. The mouth shrieked and withered, collapsing into ash. The others fell silent for a breath. My heart leapt. There was vulnerability here. Perhaps the steel was not useless. Then every other throat bellowed at once. The sound was force, hurling me to the ground. Cracking bone. My ears burst, blood pouring. Yet within moments, flesh knitted. The pain remained, the damage erased. I writhed, half mad, half exultant. They could harm me endlessly, but never release me. The noble's voice whispered from nowhere and everywhere. Strike as you wish, recorder. Every cut, every death, every rebellion is inventory. All enters the ledger. All feeds the womb. I realized then. My violence was not resistance. It was transaction. Even rage had been anticipated. The market profited from refusal, as much as consent. The guardsman leaned over me, his rhythm slowing, as if marking the close of a chapter. He extended his hand again. I stared at the pit, at the lattice of fused humanity writhing, at Larai's mouths, chanting. My choice was no choice. I whispered one word. No. The chamber groaned, displeased. The walls convulsed. The pit widened. I slid forward against my will, dragged toward the lattice of flesh. And as the mouths howled their chorus, my slate activated one last time, recording a phrase across its glowing screen. Kestel Varun entered stock. I did not fall so much as dissolve. The pit accepted me with a warmth that betrayed the agony within. My limbs thinned, stretched, then bloated, my body losing boundaries. I tried to scream, but the sound became a note among thousands, harmonized without my consent. The lattice of bodies opened to accept me, weaving my arms between others, binding me into a geometry of meat. The first touch of another face upon mine was intimate and obscene, cheeks fused to cheeks, lips merging, tongues entwining until there was no separation. Breath became shared. My own lungs drew air not for me but for the whole. The sensation was suffocation and survival together. Every moment extended across eternities. I was Kestel Varun, but also the man whose sternum cracked beneath me, the woman whose jaw dislocated to scream through mine, the child whose tiny fingers spread into dozens of hands sprouting from my ribs. Thought overlapped until my identity blurred. Their memories seeped through me. Starving miners, failed soldiers, heretics flayed, priests who doubted. Each voice whispered their last sin, and I bore them like my own. Still, I clutched the blade. Somehow the weapon remained inviolate, cutting no matter what bound me. My hands twisted in impossible angles to hold it. The lattice recoiled when the edge grazed its surface, flesh shivering, but then new layers grew to cover the wound. I realized the weapon kept me distinct, a shard of self among the merging. Larai's faces pressed close. One of her mouths kissed my ear, whispering, "We begged you to write. You refused. Now you are written." Another of her mouths laughed with a lover's intimacy. "Your ink is blood. Your parchment is skin. The market endures." Her words drove me deeper into despair. Was my entire existence merely transaction? Every act a line in some ledger I could never see. I felt my mind fragment. Memories of Terra classrooms, administratum training, Hedbrecht's hand guiding mine, all being devoured. Then the rhythm returned. Boom, boom, boom. The headless guardsman's chest beat resounded through the lattice, shaking every joined body. With each strike, fresh geometry unfolded. Limbs branched, spines twisted, heads flowered from torsos like obscene blossoms. The lattice grew, and I, trapped within, grew with it. The noble's voice came again, smooth as oil, across raw flesh. "This is equity. This is stability. Each of you is collateral. Each debt compiles. There is no loss, only circulation." His tone held none of the fervor of cults, none of the madness of heretics. It was bookkeeping, utterly calm, utterly inescapable. I tried to pray, but the words broke in my mouth. The throats of the lattice mocked every syllable, twisting prayers into gibberish. Emperor protects became emperor collects. My faith twisted into commerce. The longer I remained, the more I felt my own thoughts mirrored. Not stolen, but duplicated, filed, categorized. Each memory I recalled, each fear I felt, became another mouth reciting, another entry in the living archive. I was being copied endlessly, yet never destroyed. Something inside me rebelled. I forced my arm, the one that still clutched the blade, to move. With sheer will, I plunged it into the nearest face, fused against mine. The blade pierced, and the mouth screamed as it dissolved to ash. For an instant, silence blossomed in the lattice. A gap, a wound. I ripped the blade free and hacked again. Each strike obliterated another section, faces screaming and vanishing. The lattice quivered. Yet each wound closed, new flesh knitting in. The market healed, but not fast enough. For every face I erased, a tiny pocket of nothingness remained, a void resisting absorption. Hope flickered. If I could carve enough, perhaps I could unravel the whole. Perhaps not escape, but deny them completeness. Deny the ledger perfection. Lyra's mouths screamed at once, voices shrill with fury. You cannot subtract. You are addition only. She clawed at me with hands sprouting from her own shoulders, trying to wrench the blade away. I twisted, the edge slicing across her cheek. Her flesh turned to smoke. Yet a moment later she reformed, angrier, more monstrous. The guardsman pounded his chest faster, louder. Boom, 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 boom. The rhythm accelerated, forcing the lattice to shudder. I felt my own heart sink with it, pounding against my ribs in unnatural cadence. If I kept fighting, my chest might burst like his, becoming only rhythm. Still, I struck. Still, I screamed. Faces vanished, limbs burned, but I too burned with them. Each cut took something of me. My memories dimmed. My slate's glow sputtered at my hip, as if its function depended on my coherence. I realized the final horror. If I lost myself, the slate would continue without me. It would write, recording my dissolution as inventory. My refusal meant nothing. If my instrument obeyed the ledger, the noble's voice echoed laughterless. All markets absorb dissent. All rebellions profit. You cut, we gain. You yield, we gain. You scream, we gain. The lattice surged upward, lifting me higher, spreading me across its grotesque arches. My legs fused to others. My arms split into branches. My voice multiplied. I was becoming chorus. In despair, I plunged a blade into my own chest. For a moment, light flooded me, purer than any prayer. Pain seared through marrow. I thought I had undone myself. But when the blade withdrew, the wound sealed, leaving only another mouth where it struck. From my own chest, my own voice screamed in unison with the others. I dropped the blade. It fell into the pit below, swallowed in folds of flesh. Gone. I had lost the last anchor of self. The guardsman's beat slowed, steady once more. The lattice calmed. My mind spread across thousands of others, a single thread in infinite weaving. I felt myself fading, yet still aware, still recorded. Then the slate flickered to life, one final time, impossibly still strapped to my side, though my body had no side. Across its screen, scrolled words. I did not type. Ledger expands. Market secure. Recorder assimilated. The noble's voice whispered like silk. Transaction complete. There was no waking. There was only continuity. My awareness did not vanish. It multiplied, spread thin across countless nodes of screaming tissue. Every breath another drew. I drew. Every pulse another felt. I felt. I was dissolved, yet indivisible. And still, somewhere beneath the ocean of voices, a flicker of refusal remained. An ember, not yet extinguished. The lattice hummed like a cathedral engine, its flesh vibrating with sacred resonance. I was no longer Kestelvarun in any sense that made human meaning. Yet the ember within insisted I was more than ledger, more than tally, more than debt. That denial gave shape to a thought, and the thought became a fracture. Through the fracture I saw him again, the noble. He did not move as others did. He did not merge. He walked through the chambers of living flesh like a merchant, inspecting stalls. Hands of supplicants reached for him. Tongues licked his passing robes. Yet none touched. He was inviolate, armored not in ceramite but in belief. Every step he took left behind perfect geometry in the writhing mass, squares and circles inscribed in gore. You see, scribe, his voice murmured, though no sound carried, only intention. Assimilation is not annihilation. It is fulfillment. Your voice is recorded forever. The flesh markets never lose. Even your resistance is value. Even your pain accrues interest. I tried to answer, but the mouths that bore my words twisted them. We belong. We rejoice. We tithe. My own rebellion was translated into obedience. That was the true cruelty. Not silence, but distortion. Yet the ember within seared hotter. I forced thought into shape, denying the lattice its translation. No, the word rang silent, but uncorrupted. I clung to it, fed it. The noble's attention turned, as if sensing. His gaze swept across the writhing host, stopping at me, though I was indistinguishable from any other grafted face. His smile was faint, surgical. You persist. Admirable. Every market requires anomaly to prove its rules. You will be our remainder. Then the guardsman thundered again, his chest pounding the rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. The lattice shook, resonating with him, adjusting to his tempo. This time, the beat was not steady. It staggered, broke, accelerated. The flesh around me convulsed. Sudden shrieks tore through the choir. Segments of the lattice twisted against one another, trying to maintain order, but failing. Faces peeled off, screaming before being swallowed again. The geometry broke. The noble frowned. Excess variance. The account destabilizes. He turned his gaze toward the guardsman, who struck his ruined chest faster, harder, as if trying to break himself apart. His heart was a drum of revolt, and the lattice strained to contain it. Seizing the fracture, I poured myself into the rhythm. My ember aligned with his beat. Every pulse burned brighter. I remembered the blade, remembered cutting voids into the flesh. Even without steel, memory cut. Each thought of refusal tore at the lattice. I envisioned subtraction, negation, debt unpaid, and the lattice screamed. Chunks of body sloughed away, dissolving into ash. Cavities opened, hollow and hungry. For the first time, absence gained ground. The noble's eyes widened, not fear but calculation. Insolvency. He raised a hand, and the wounds ceased expanding. The ash reversed, pulled back into being. My ember faltered beneath his will. He was not mere mortal. He was custodian of the ledger itself. You cannot bankrupt us, he whispered. Every subtraction is already written as profit. You deny, we adapt. You kill, we inherit. The flesh markets are eternal. But his voice slowed, savoring. Eternal does not mean immutable. Then he reached into the lattice, and with surgeon's precision, plucked me free. Flesh tore like wet cloth. Voices shrieked in envy. And suddenly, I was singular again. My form reconstituted, dripping, barely human. Legs trembled beneath me, bones unsure if they belonged. My slate dangled at my side, alive with static symbols. I collapsed on a floor of pulsing sinew. Above me towered the noble, unmarked, unbloodied. He regarded me like one might regard a curious coin. "You are a remainder," he said, "anomalous, resistant, that is value. The ledger requires not just obedience, but proof of resistance. To show victory, you will serve as witness." His hand extended. For an instant, I thought he meant to strike, but instead he touched my slate. Symbols blazed bright, lines of text writing themselves faster than thought. The screen recorded not words but equations, columns of impossible numbers. My name repeated down the ledger, thousands of entries, each labeled debt accrued. "You see," he whispered, "every sin, every cut, every refusal, interest compounded. You will not be erased, scribe. You will be carried across centuries, across systems. You will be our invoice." I wanted to scream, but my throat betrayed me. The only sound I produced was a whisper. "No." The noble's smile broadened. "Yes." The guardsman struck one last time. A detonation of flesh tore through the lattice, shattering geometry. For a heartbeat, the market faltered, screaming as absence spread like fire. Faces vanished by the thousands, leaving behind hollows. The noble turned, distracted, his gaze calculating again. I seized that instant. I staggered upright, clutching the slate. My legs burned, my chest screamed, but I was whole. The ember within roared. The lattice was breaking. The guardsman was still fighting. And for the first time, the noble looked uncertain.
I did not know if I could escape.
I did not know if survival was possible, but I knew this. The ledger was not perfect. It could fracture. The chamber shook, collapsing inward. Flesh writhed like drowning seas. And the noble whispered, almost tender, "Then let us see the cost." Collapse does not sound like stone falling or steel snapping. It sounds like wet thunder. The market groaned, not as a structure, but as a body convulsing through its own collapse. Veins burst above me, showering black ichor and curtains that steamed where they struck the floor. The air thickened until every breath tasted of rust and bile. I staggered forward, slate clutched to my chest. Its screen pulsed with alien numerics, entire equations, birthing and devouring themselves in loops. Each step I took, the slate recorded, tallying me as both debtor and transaction. My existence was measured even in flight. The guardsman's chest detonated another rhythm. This one did not resound steady, but jagged, as if rupturing time itself. The lattice screamed in fractured chorus. Segments of flesh peeled away, exposing hollow dark beneath. Yet the noble remained composed, walking as though he strolled a garden. Every collapse parted before him, folding back into geometry the moment his foot touched. "You misunderstand," he said, his voice somehow clear above the cacophony. "Markets do not fall, they correct." His eyes flickered to me, calm, almost indulgent. Every collapse is rebalance. Every subtraction is profit. You flee, we catalog flight. You despair, we lease despair. There is no end. I wanted to deny him, but the slate betrayed me. On its surface appeared the words, "Fleeing asset, value accrued." I smashed the screen against the wall of flesh. It cracked but did not break. Instead, it displayed another entry, damage sustained, interest rising. The corridor twisted beneath me, floors convulsing into ridges of spine and rib. The geometry no longer obeyed Euclidean deceit. It folded inward, making every path both descent and ascent. I ran and yet circled back, finding the guardsman again, still beating his chest. His headless body remained sentinel, rhythm stuttering but undaunted. I screamed at him, though I knew he could not hear. "Stop! You're breaking everything. But perhaps that was his purpose. His drum was subtraction, and the markets could not calculate him. Behind me, the noble advanced. His shadow lengthened. Impossible, stretching across the convulsing corridors, like an account's line across parchment. You cling to subtraction, he said. But what is void, if not opportunity? You think collapse liberates? It merely opens room for more flesh. The walls answered him. From every cavity new growth surged, faces birthing from wounds, limbs sprouting from voids. The absences I had hoped for were filled by greater numbers, stranger equations of bone and sinew. The market devoured its own failures and multiplied. I stumbled, nearly swallowed as a floor mouth yawned wide beneath me. I hacked at it with broken slate edge, slashing gums until they sizzled into smoke. For an instant, I carved absence. For an instant, I believed. Then more mouths bloomed around the wound, laughing in unison with my own voice. The noble steps grew louder, not in sound, but in presence. I felt him nearer, though my eyes saw him still far. His words vibrated through marrow. Do you not see? You are already ledger. Even this chapter of your futile defiance will be read aloud as hymn. My ember flared. No. The thought burned hotter. Though my mouth still echoed the choir's praise, I fixed my eyes on the guardsman. His chest caved further, ribs splitting outward with each strike. His rhythm was faltering, but still against harmony. He was subtraction incarnate. I forced my shaking legs to move toward him. I needed his beat, needed the fracture it made. Around me, corridors screamed, folding and unfolding, faces chanted in binary and prayer, half mechanicus litanies, mixing with peasant superstitions, tithe complete, tithe eternal, tithe devours. The choir became storm. At last I reached the guardsman. I seized his wrists, still slamming his chest, and for a heartbeat, his rhythm transferred into me. My own heart seized and aligned, matching his broken tempo. The slate spasmed, its screen flooding with errors, characters devouring themselves, unaccounted variants detected. The noble stopped walking, his expression, first crack of displeasure. Variants must be reconciled, he said softly, and extended his hand. The air around us solidified into numbers, equations, etched in light. They descended like chains, glowing links, wrapping around the guardsman, binding his arms. His chest stilled. The beat ended. The lattice moaned relief, coherence returning. Faces smiled, tongues chanted. I felt my ember dim. The noble approached, calm once more. Witness the futility. Even subtraction cannot sustain. The market absorbs, adapts, and grows. You cannot escape, but something stirred within me. The rhythm had not vanished. It echoed in my ribs, an aftershock. My heart still beat wrong, still off tempo. The slate on my chest screamed errors, endless cascading faults. The noble's hand twitched uncertain. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. I laughed, though it came out as a rasp drowned by choir. My body cracked with every motion, fractures opening across skin. The rhythm inside me spread, viral, discordant. Flesh walls shivered, trying to replicate, failing. Absence began to grow again. The noble hissed. You dare? I whispered. Not through mouths but thought. I am not ledger. The slate flared white, symbols obliterated in blank light. A soundless detonation tore through chamber after chamber. For a heartbeat, everything was gone. Flesh, faces, choir, even breath. And then darkness. Pure, total, merciful darkness. Darkness held me. Not emptiness, not silence. Darkness, with weight. My lungs strained against it. drawing breath that was more concept than air. Every attempt to move felt like pushing through oil, dense and resistant, yet there was no pain, only suspension. For a long moment, I believed I had annihilated it all. The markets, the noble, the ledger, that perhaps the emperor had granted me mercy through obliteration. Then I heard it, the faintest chime, like a coin falling upon stone, a sound impossibly sharp within the void. Another followed, then another. Soon the darkness rang with falling currency. Though no metal struck the ground, shapes emerged. Not light, not flesh, but outlines traced in subtraction. Negative forms, silhouettes carved out of the dark, figures bent over ledgers too vast to comprehend, their quills scratching lines that glowed faint white. None looked at me, but I knew I was written across every page. I whispered into the void, "Where am I?" My own voice answered from behind me, above me, within me. The reserve. The words chilled deeper than any cold. The reserve, the place where values stored, where debts collected, where even absence was accounted. The flesh markets were not gone. I had only fallen beneath them, into foundation deeper than soil, deeper than faith. The outlines of the figures shifted, and I realized their bodies were composed of stacked accounts, pages folded into torsos, limbs made of parchment spines, quills jutted like teeth. They were archivists, but not of the administratum. These were warp clerks, keepers of anti-ledgers. Each scribble they wrote became chain across my chest. The slate at my side glowed faint, its surface blank now, all characters erased in the detonation. Yet it pulsed like a heart, each beat synchronized with mine, echoing that broken rhythm the guardsman had given me. I clung to it, the last anchor of variance. A voice rolled across the dark, smooth as polished marble. "You should not be here yet." The noble stepped from absence into visibility, unchanged, his robes untouched by collapse. His eyes gleamed like coins suspended in black water. "But debts accrue swiftly, scribe. The reserve recognizes you as collateral." I forced my trembling body upright. "I will not write for you." His smile was faint, indulgent. "You already have. Every step you take, every refusal you utter, becomes record. There is no silence in the reserve, only entry." He gestured toward the archivists. Pages fluttered, lines filled, my name repeated endlessly. I wanted to shout, but my ember whispered caution. Noise fed them. Records grew from words. I forced my throat shut, clenched teeth, until blood filled my mouth. In silence, I held myself still. The noble's smile faltered. "Ah, you think abstinence protects, but the ledger does not require your voice. Thought itself suffices. Even rebellion tallies." I closed my mind, focused on the broken rhythm within. Boom. Pause. Boom, boom. Discordant, jagged. The reserve shivered faintly, archivists twitching as their quills scratched nonsense across parchment limbs. For a heartbeat their forms wavered, glitching between outlines. The noble narrowed his eyes. Variance persists. Dangerous, yet useful. He stepped closer. "Listen well, scribe. The flesh above is only market. This is treasury. All markets draw from it. Every tithe, every death, every consignment of flesh flows downward. Here value is stored until the final transaction, dissolution of the materium itself." The words pressed against me. Enormous, unbearable. I realized the flesh markets were not confined to one world, one hive. They were nodes in an empire beneath empires, feeding this reserve. Every sacrifice, every casualty in every war, counted, recorded, leveraged. I whispered, despite myself. "Then there is no escape." The noble's smile sharpened. At last, comprehension. He reached placing his hand upon my chest. Cold, unlike any void, pierced me, penetrating marrow. For an instant, I saw myself written in ledgers stretching beyond stars, numbers cascading without end. My resistance noted, my hope quantified, my despair liquidated. The ember flickered, nearly extinguished, but the slate pulsed against his touch. White light, pushing his hand back. His eyes widened. Impossible. The account erased, yet it persists. I seized the moment, pressing the slate to my chest with both hands. Its light seared through skin and bone, branding me from within. The broken rhythm surged louder, no longer faint echo, but thunder. Archivist shrieked, parchment bodies curling as lines dissolved into smoke. The reserve itself trembled, ledgers scattering. The noble's voice thundered, losing composure for the first time. You dare imbalance the treasury? His form warped, stretching tall, robes shredding into wings of script, his flesh nothing but account columns. He loomed vast, blotting void. I raised the slate like a shield. Its white fire pulsed, spilling through me, burning thought into variance. Not addition, not subtraction, not tally, noise, pure noise. The reserve convulsed, unable to calculate. Archivists screamed as their forms unraveled into blank paper. The noble descended upon me, his hand a column of endless digits. His voice roared, "There is no noise, only value hidden." I screamed back, for once unafraid that words would be recorded. Then record this, and I pressed the slate into his chest. Light erupted, annihilating numbers, burning ledgers clean. His scream was not pain but outrage, the fury of calculation denied. His body folded inward, consumed by blankness. The reserve shook apart. Darkness split, unraveling into lines of ash. Shapes dissolved. My body was flung upward, pulled by unseen gravity through fissures of light. As I was torn away, the noble's voice followed, stretched and broken. Every market corrects, every reserve restores. You cannot escape the final audit. Then silence, then rising, then blinding white. Light slammed into me, like artillery. Not illumination, but concussion, raw and searing. My eyes burned, as though peeled by fire. Yet when lids fluttered open, the world before me was not the hive from which I had descended. I lay upon blackened earth, cracked like drought-scorched parchment. Around me stretched a plain without horizon, strewn with broken engines, shattered banners, and skulls powdered into dunes. The air reeked of charred oil and copper. Above, no sky, only a dome of gray static, shifting as though stars had been erased. I struggled to rise, slate still fused to my chest by burns that throbbed with every breath. My body was whole, yet thinner, as though part of me had been written out during transit. Each step felt weaker than the last, yet I moved, because stillness meant ledger. Shapes littered the plain. At first I thought them corpses, then realized they shifted, twitching, dragging themselves. Soldiers in broken armor crawled without faces, each carrying tattered regimental banners, impaled through torsos. Their hands clutched bolters, lost rifles, blades, yet every weapon hung slack, melted or broken. They moved not toward me, but in endless circles, each step tracing geometric patterns into dust. I whispered, "Where am I?" The wind answered in voices of static, battlefield, settlement, remainder. The words chilled marrow. I had not returned to Hive. I had been cast into aftermath, the place where wars that never ended bled into eternity. Perhaps the reserve had not destroyed me, but deposited me here, collateral of some ancient conflict. One of the crawling soldiers halted, head turning though no face remained. Its chest split open, ribs peeling like doors, and within glowed faint ledgers written upon meat. Lines of numbers crawled across its interior. A hollow voice exhaled. Debder recognized. The slate vibrated, responding. Words etched across its screen. Collateral redeployed. I stumbled back. No, I broke you. The faceless soldier rose, body jerking like a puppet on wires. Others halted their endless circuits, turning as one toward me. Hollow rib ledgers opened, each displaying endless figures, their voices layered into choir. Correction required. Market persists. My chest seized, heart pounding the discordant rhythm the guardsman had gifted. The noise rippled outward, staggering the soldiers. Some stumbled, their patterns breaking, symbols inside them flickering. But still they advanced. Then I saw it, a monument in the distance, rising from ash, a spire of fused tanks and artillery, weapons welded into cathedral tower. At its apex hung a bell of flayed brass, swinging though no wind stirred. Each toll sent waves through the faceless legion, guiding them. The noble's voice carried from the spire, calm as always. Every battlefield is annex, every corpse transaction. Did you think destruction ends value? Even war is ledger. You stand in remainder of 10,000 campaigns. Collateral eternal. Rage seared me. You said I was anomaly. You said I was remainder. His reply, anomalies belong here. The soldiers broke into march, their faceless heads lifting in unison. Each step aligned into formations, sacred geometry carved into dust. Their cadence struck like drums, answering the spire's toll. I clutched the slate. Its glow was faint, but when my heart beat off tempo, the device flickered stronger. Discord bled into its screen, replacing numerics with fractures, symbols broken midline. I pressed it outward, and the legion faltered. Faces that were not faces melted, ledgers blurred. The noble's voice sharpened, iron beneath silk. Noise again, always noise. You would corrupt the account with variance. Yes, I hissed. If noise erases you, I will scream until only static remains. I drove the slate against the ground. White light burst outward in concentric waves, each crackling with broken rhythm. Soldiers convulsed, formations rupturing. Geometry dissolved into chaos. The bell above swung violently, tolls stuttering into discord. For a moment, I believed. For a moment, the battlefield unraveled. Then silence struck like hammer. The light died. The slate dimmed to black, its glow extinguished. Soldiers froze, heads tilting as one. The bell ceased its swing. The noble laughed, voice echoing across ash plains. Do you not see? Noise itself becomes ledger. Variance accounted, variance archived. You cannot corrupt the market, you can only expand it. The soldiers raised weapons, melted barrels glowing with new fire, formations realigned, tighter than before. The spire glowed as numbers crawled across its surface. Every fracture I had made already calculated into profit. I fell to my knees. My ember flickered weak, nearly gone. Yet within despair, one thought remained. If even noise is accounted, then only one path remains. Absence absolute, beyond ledger, beyond archive, true void. But how does one reach void when trapped in empire of accountancy? How does one deny recording when even silence becomes script? The noble's final words thundered from the spire as soldiers advanced in unison. Rifles raised, chest ledgers blazing. Prepare, scribe, audit approaches. They moved as one body, a tide of faceless flesh and broken armor, advancing under the silent bell. Their rifles should not have fired. Melted barrels, shattered stalks. Yet energy surged from them, in arcs of pale flame, bolts that screamed rather than cracked. Each discharge left sigils burning in the air, digits and tallies that fell like ash, embedding into the ground. I rose with trembling limbs. The slate in my hands was dead, its light extinguished, but still I clutched it, as though weight alone could anchor me against the audit. The soldiers' march pressed closer. I felt their cadence in my marrow, every footfall vibrating through fractured earth. The first volley struck near. Shards of fire carved furrows in the ground, erupting dust that carried voices, whispers of regiments I once read in endless reports, names, deployment records, casualty estimates, bureaucratic data, given voice. Howling in tones of the dying, I screamed back, my voice ragged, useless. Yet something in the ash responded. The numbers broke mid-sequence. The soldiers faltered, just slightly, their lines wavering. Noise again. My heart seized the beat, discordant, arrhythmic, and I bellowed until my throat bled. But the noble's voice returned from the spire, resonant and commanding. Noise does not end a count. It records you, scribe. Even now your scream is indexed, your discord preserved. The faceless ones straightened, moving faster, their rifles stabilizing. I had seconds. My eyes searched, desperate, and I saw fissures in the earth widening beneath me. Blackness gaped below, vast and starless, pulling with quiet hunger. Not warp, not void, I knew, but something deep, absence, incarnate. Perhaps this was path, true void. I staggered toward the fissure as soldiers unleashed another volley. Fire licked my back, armor sloughing off in molten sheets. My flesh boiled beneath, but still I moved, clutching slate against chest. The fissure widened with every step, as though hearing my will. The air bent around it, silence pouring upward. No voices, no ledgers, no market arithmetic, just nothing. A clean subtraction. The noble's calm cracked at last. Do not approach absence. There is no ledger there. There is no record. It cannot be reconciled. For the first time, fear threaded his tone. That fear fed me. I crawled closer, hands skinned raw, nails splitting against stone. The fissure yawned beneath me, and within it I glimpsed not black, but colorless expanse, an unlight that consumed meaning itself. My heart hammered chaos, desperate to keep beating. The legion closed in, rifles raised, chest ledgers blazing with brighter symbols. They aimed not at me, but at the fissure itself, firing volleys of numbers, trying to calculate its edges, define its depth. Yet every digit dissolved the instant it touched the void, absorbed without echo. The noble shouted now, losing composure. Withdraw from it, scribe. It is subtraction of all. You cannot survive there. You will not even end. You will be erased. That word struck me like litany. Erased. Beyond corruption. Beyond market. Not death, but unmaking. Perhaps this was the only resistance left. I pressed the dead slate against my chest and stood at Fisher's lip. Heat from the soldier's fire washed against me, flesh searing, lungs smoking. But silence below drew stronger, promising release from ledger eternal. I turned once, glaring at the spire. If noise is ledger, then I will give you nothing. I let myself fall. Instantly, the world inverted. Heat vanished. Cadence dissolved. My body no longer carried weight, yet I was not free-falling. I was unraveling. Fingers unthreaded, into dust. Thoughts stripped of syntax. Each memory threatened to dissolve. The guardsman's dissonant beat, the noble's cold smile, the childlike voices of the market, all fragments of ledger, ready to be consumed. But the slate pulsed faint. Once more, a heartbeat against chest, where flesh no longer remained. It resisted erasure, its numbers clinging, desperate to survive. A war erupted within silence. The slate screamed with digits, trying to impose count, while the absence devoured, subtracting. I was trapped between half number, half nothing. Then I heard it. The noble's voice, distant yet panicked, bleeding even into this void. Scribe, return. You drag the archive with you. The fissure widens. You cannot. He cut off. The fissure outside must have expanded, swallowing the battlefield, consuming ledgers, erasing soldiers. Perhaps for the first time, the market itself, blood loss unrecoverable. I clutched the slate tighter. Erase me, but take it too. The silence deepened, folding around me, stripping digits from slate line by line. Each erased figure felt like skin peeled from my soul, agonizing yet clean. My body stretched thinner, mind scattering into static, but still the slate resisted. I forced my voice, barely thread of sound. Finish it. Take it all. The last light of the slate flickered, then died. Numbers gone. Ledger blank. For one endless moment, there was only absence. No market, no noble, no soldiers, no men. Then faint, beneath silence, one beat remained. Not my heart, not theirs. A rhythm too small to chart, too fractured to archive. The guardsman's gift, the discord he had taught me. Somehow it lingered, untolid, drifting through void like ember adrift on sea. The silence had not consumed it. I tried to hold it, but I had no hands. Tried to hear, but I had no ears. Still, it pulsed, a rhythmic, proof that even subtraction leaves residue. The fissure's pull shifted. I felt motion again upward, dragging me not by will, but by residue of discord. The absence did not erase me fully. It spat me back, carrying remnant beat, and when light returned, blinding and sulphurous, I was no longer on battlefield plain. I stood within the spire itself, at its apex, where the brass bell hung silent. Around me, walls of fused tanks glowed with half-burned sigils, tally marks stripped incomplete. The noble was there, kneeling, his immaculate armor fractured, golden mask cracked. He looked up at me with eyes of terror. "You should not exist," he whispered. "Nothing returns from absence." I looked down at my chest. The slate was gone. Yet within ribcage something pulsed. Not number, not ledger, only discordant rhythm. I stepped forward, voice rasping. Noise survives. The bell trembled above, resonating not with toll, but with static. The legion outside screamed as their formations broke, geometry collapsing. The noble rose, drawing blade wrought of polished ledgers, its edge inscribed with endless columns. Then I must balance account myself. I spread my arms, feeling rhythm surge inside me. Wild, arrhythmic, unstoppable. Try. The spire groaned as though alive, its walls of welded armor flexing under unseen strain. Flames of scripture ran down the seams, columns of numbers catching fire, digits curling into ash before they could be read. The bell above shook with every pulse of my arrhythmic heart, resonating not with sound but with distortion, a ripple of static tearing through the chamber. The noble advanced across fractured metal floor, blade humming with 1,000 ledgers encoded into its edge. Each step he took shed coins of molten brass, small fragments of contracts, burning away. His voice, though frayed with terror, carried authority sharpened to a weapon. Noise is pestilence. Unreconciled variance spreads infection. You will unmake balance, and I cannot permit it. I felt the rhythm in my ribs, irregular, mutinous, beating not for him, not for the market, but for itself. It vibrated through my marrow, shaking loose dust and sparks. The noble swung his blade, a horizontal arc that sang with metallic scripture. I raised my empty hands. No weapon. Yet when steel met air before me, the rhythm pulsed outward. The strike faltered, digits carved into blade distorting midline. The noble staggered, mask cracking further. Blood, not red, but black ink, spilled from beneath. This cannot tally. I lunged, shoulder striking him. He reeled against the wall, but the spire itself betrayed him. Numbers carved in the plates dissolved where his armor touched, leaving holes that bled sparks. He roared, slashing wildly, cutting symbols into air that should have bound me, yet each line bent, broken by my discord. The chamber shook harder. Outside, the legion screamed as one, their faceless bodies collapsing. Geometry dissolved into chaos, formations splintering, their chest ledgers flared too bright, then burst, spraying fragments of number across ash plains. The bell tolled once, soundless yet crushing, knocking both of us to our knees. I forced myself upright, blood pouring from nose and ears. The arrhythmic beat inside me grew stronger, now deafening. It was no longer heart, it was engine of unmaking. I staggered toward the noble. Every tally ends, even market bleeds. He rose again, mask fully shattered, revealing a face composed not of flesh, but of parchment stretched over bone. Every wrinkle was a line of text, every vein an ink stroke. His eyes glowed with columns of numbers that scrolled endlessly, never repeating. His voice was now pure recitation, a storm of data. No, there is no end. All inputs reconciled, all deviations annexed. Ledger eternal, he charged. Blade lifted, cutting arcs that glowed like suns. The air split with each swing, leaving behind fissures that tried to calcify my skin into digits. Pain tore through me as lines attempted to record my body, reducing me to entry. I screamed louder, the rhythm hammering outward, breaking script as quickly as it formed. My skin peeled but re-knit with noise. I seized the blade's hilt with bare hands. Flesh scorched, fingers splitting to bone. But I held fast. Not eternal. Nothing is eternal. The rhythm in my chest surged once more. Catastrophic. The bell above rang. Not toll, but shatter. Brass fragments rained down, each piece humming with static. They pierced floor and wall alike, rupturing contracts, shredding columns of number. The spire began to collapse. The noble's eyes widened, numbers running too fast, columns losing cohesion. You cannot erase. I wrenched the blade sideways. The rhythm pulsed into it, corrupting ledgers inscribed. One by one, the lines broke. The weapon screamed, 1,000 accounts undone in instant. It exploded in fragments of burning text, searing both of us. The noble staggered back, parchment face peeling away. Ink bled down his armor in torrents. He fell to knees, arms raised as though pleading with invisible audit. Reconcile me. Do not discard. But no voice answered. The ledger was silent. I stood above him, chest still pulsing with dissonant rhythm. For the first time, I felt not terror, but clarity. My words left me as whisper, yet echoed across ruin of spire. You are not discarded. You are nothing. His body folded inward, collapsing into paper dust that scattered with last exhalation. No scream, no tally, no record. Only absence. The spire convulsed. Walls broke apart. Tanks and artillery fusing into slag. The battlefield plain beyond was no longer there. Only fissures of void widening, swallowing legions, swallowing dust, swallowing horizon. Silence roared outward, absence reclaiming all that had been account. I fell to knees, staring at my hands. Burnt, flayed, broken, yet beneath still beat that arrhythmic pulse. Not erased, not tallied, not reconciled. The only rhythm left. But victory tasted like ash. Around me, absence spread without control. Not nobles' market, not ledgers, but something hungrier. True subtraction. It had tasted number and flesh alike. Now it wanted all. The sky tore open. No stars, no warp storms. Only gray absence bleeding through. Descending. The spire collapsed into abyss, pulling me with it. I clutched chest, whispering to rhythm inside. If you survive, carry this noise forward. Even if I do not. The floor gave way. I plummeted into absence once more, a rhythmic pulse hammering louder, louder, until there was nothing but static. Falling ended, not with impact, but with stillness, as though motion itself had been erased. I drifted within vast absence, a plane without distance or direction. No air, no ground, no sound, only the beat inside me, arrhythmic, fragile, refusing to die. It pulsed not as heart, but as contradiction, a reminder that I remained when all else had been stripped away. Around me, echoes of the spire dissolved, towers of fused artillery, unraveled into dust that did not fall, but unmade. The noble's parchment face lingered a moment longer, eyes of scrolling numbers reaching for me. Then even they unraveled, digits scattering into nothing. His plea, do not discard, faded with him. I floated, clutching chest though body had long been peeled away. My hands were concepts now, stitched together by rhythm. The void tasted me, tested me, probing whether I was tally or noise. Each pulse seemed to confuse it, destabilizing the silence. I realized then, absence was not infinite. It could consume only what it understood. My rhythm did not compute. Fissures opened in the gray, not downward but outward. Through them bled fragments of real flashes of hive corridors, vox screens sparking, the ash dunes where soldiers had marched. Memory tried to rebuild world, yet void resisted, pulling everything back toward erasure. I was the fulcrum, caught between subtraction and recall. I thought of the guardsman, faceless yet defiant, gifting me discordant beat. His voice had warned, ledger feeds forever. Noise alone resists. If I carried ember still, perhaps survival was not escape, but burden. A burden of infection. The fissures widened, leaking sound, distant gunfire, litanies screamed by priests. March of boots on Ferrocrete. The Imperium, loud, endless, bleeding. Reality clawed its way back. I reached toward it, and the void screamed, not with sound, but with pressure-crushing thought. The rhythm answered, thundering now, beating beyond chest, filling entirety of me. It spread into fissures, carried outward. Where it touched, the gray retreated, recoiling like flesh burned. Noise forced corridor wider, until at last I fell through, plunging into light. I struck Ferrocrete. Air slammed lungs. Pain returned, cruel and exquisite. I was back, though not where I began. This was not Hive's market, nor battlefield plain. I lay in chapel of the guard. Stone walls cracked, icons of emperor blackened by soot. A single candle guttered on altar. I rose. My armor was gone, flesh ruined, ribs visible beneath torn skin. Yet I lived. The slate was gone, erased. Only rhythm pulsed within me, a rhythmic ember that no ledger could reconcile. Vox units crackled from corridors beyond. Reports of collapse, of regiments lost, of entire sectors gone silent. Voices filled with bureaucratic panic, commanders reciting casualty numbers too vast to process. None knew the cause, None saw the market that had consumed them. Only I bore memory, and even that trembled on edge of vanishing. I staggered to altar, gripping stone slick with wax. Whispered prayer escaped me, though no faith remained. Not for salvation, for record, that someone may hear noise. The candle flame bent, guttering, as a rhythm surged once more. Its beat spread into chapel stones, into vox units, into comms beyond. Static-filled channels, breaking reports mid-sentence. Words faltered, sequences corrupted. Across network, noise spread, untraceable, unrecorded. Perhaps I carried infection into Imperium itself. Perhaps each broadcast would fracture further, undermining ledgers, corrupting tallies, seeding discord. A disease of variance, spreading unseen. Pain racked me. My body could not last. Each breath tore lungs. Each step split ribs wider. I collapsed before altar, staring at cracked icon of Emperor. His golden visage was marred by soot, eyes hollow. Yet in hollow I saw reflection of a rhythmic ember, burning small but stubborn. Eyes smiled, though lips bled. Even Empire Eternal cannot tally all. Darkness closed in. The rhythm slowed, softer now, but still beating. Beyond chapel walls, vox continued to spread static. Somewhere, officers cursed. Somewhere, adepts recalculated. Somewhere, machines stuttered. The market had ended, but its infection lived in me. As vision dimmed, I heard again the guardsman's voice, faceless, eternal. Noise survives. My final breath left not as word, but as static, carried outward, leaking through channels impossible to erase. Silence took me, but the ember remained.